The Exarcav landed silently on the barren planet of Ryler, its massive form blending into the shadows of the towering mountains around it. The ship had been cloaked from the moment it entered the planet's atmosphere, ensuring its presence went unnoticed to the primitive sensors of the few life forms that dared to roam here. The predator stretched its limbs and let out a deep breath. The atmosphere was thick but breathable for now. It scanned the horizon, its sharp eyes catching the faintest movements. The smell of something unfamiliar lingered in the air. As it adjusted its focus, its mind honed in on the mission ahead. There was prey to hunt. For days it had studied the planet's surface from orbit, analyzing the data from its long-range scanners. It had located the target species scattered in small colonies throughout the planet. Its research indicated that these creatures were primitive and weak, barely capable of coordinated action. The Exarcav's hunting instincts had been honed through countless successful hunts across the galaxy. Its previous targets had been swift to die once it set its sights on them. The Exarcav crouched low to the ground and moved swiftly through the terrain. Its footsteps were soundless, even in the gravel. It had learned the art of stealth in its youth. It thrived in the shadows. While other predators relied on brute force, the Exarcav relied on precision and patience. It was a hunter born and bred, one whose reputation had spread across the stars, leaving a trail of vanished species and forgotten worlds. There was something about the way the humans moved that caught its attention. Though the patterns were strange, the Exarcav could detect something more than just the usual prey mentality in their actions. They were not fleeing in fear like most species would in the face of such an apex predator. They were alert. They were looking for something, a threat, but they had not run, and this gave the Exarcav pause. It watched as they set up camp around a series of sharp, jagged rocks. A small group of 5 humans gathered there, their voices barely audible over the wind, their bodies constantly shifting in subtle synchrony, a strange motion that suggested they were preparing for something. The Exarcav's mind quickly ran through the possibilities. It considered multiple strategies for attacking, yet none of them felt right. The humans were acting with an eerie precision that felt different from the chaotic movements of prey. The predator's mind sharpened as it analyzed the humans closer. Their eyes were scanning constantly, and when one of them looked up toward the sky, the Exarcav felt the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Its camouflage sensors buzzed briefly. Something was wrong. The Exarcav had been observed, but it had not been spotted. It was a strange feeling for a creature that had never been noticed until it chose to reveal itself. Suddenly, a loud snap broke the stillness of the air, and the Exarcav froze. It had been caught in a snare, a trap that it should have seen coming. It growled lowly in frustration. The humans had been aware of its presence. They had set a trap, and for the first time in its life, the predator felt a flicker of doubt, a creeping uncertainty that had never crossed its mind before. The prey was not fleeing, it was fighting back. The Exarcav pulled itself free from the snare with a burst of strength, its muscles straining as it ripped through the vines that had bound it. The trap had been simple, yet effective. For a moment, the predator stood still, recalibrating its thoughts. No other species had ever dared to fight back in such a way. Most would have fled, terrified, at the mere hint of danger. But the humans, these strange creatures, had set a snare to trap the hunter. The predator's eyes narrowed as it scanned the surroundings, trying to understand the humans' tactics. The group remained still, seemingly unfazed by the near attack. The Exarcav could feel their eyes on it, even if they didn't move. They were studying it, calculating. The predator's sensors picked up the faintest shift in the air, a breeze carrying a subtle change in the human scent. It was not fear that the predator sensed now, but awareness. They knew it was there, and they knew it had just failed. The Exarcav felt a chill run through its scales. It circled the camp from the shadows, observing every move, every glance between the humans. They were not panicking. They were not scattering. They were preparing. It was a feeling the Exarcav had never experienced before, a sensation that its prey was in control. A low growl rumbled deep in its chest, the sound barely audible over the wind. It had been hunting for centuries, eliminating threats before they even had a chance to fight. But now, these humans, with their primitive tools and strange, unpredictable behavior, were testing the extracav in ways no other species ever had. The predator could feel its instincts, honed by years of experience, telling it to strike. But something held it back. It watched as one of the humans, an older man, moved to a small fire, poking at it with a stick. The human's hands were steady, his actions deliberate. He wasn't afraid. He didn't even look at the extracav, and yet the predator could sense the calm confidence emanating from him. It was as if the human knew exactly what the extracav was thinking. For a moment, the extracav hesitated, the faintest crack of uncertainty in its mind. It had hunted for years, killing without remorse. But this was different. These humans were not prey. They were something more, something that couldn't be easily classified. The extracav's mind raced, trying to adapt to the situation. It was no longer just a simple hunt. There was more at play here, more than just survival. The humans were not running or hiding. They were standing their ground. They weren't afraid. They were ready to fight. The predator's hunting instincts clashed with its growing confusion. The group continued to move with calm efficiency, each human acting with purpose. One of them checked the surroundings, another carefully examined their weapons, and yet another kept scanning the horizon. The predator could see the signs of preparation, a rhythm to their actions that was unlike any other prey it had encountered. Finally, the older man spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're still here. They'll wait for us to make the first move." The others nodded, their faces hard with resolve. The extracav's eyes flickered. They were waiting for it to make the first move. The predator's heart, if it had one, might have skipped a beat. This wasn't fear. It wasn't hesitation. It was something else, something it couldn't quite place. It wasn't used to being on the defensive. It wasn't used to waiting. For the first time, the extracav felt the weight of its own uncertainty. The hunt had just begun, but now it had a new kind of enemy. The extracav watched from the shadows, its senses heightened. The humans were not acting like prey. They were moving with purpose, each step deliberate, each decision calculated. It was as if they were playing a game, but the rules were unfamiliar, and the predator didn't know if it was winning or losing. It studied them carefully. The older man who had spoken earlier seemed to be the leader, his every action exuding calm confidence. He was always the first to assess their surroundings, always the first to prepare. The others followed his lead without hesitation. There was a harmony to their movements, a connection between them that the extracav couldn't fully comprehend. It was unlike any pack or group the predator had hunted before. They weren't simply surviving. They were working together. For a moment, the extracav considered leaving. It was clear that these humans were not like other species. They had an odd resilience, a strange unity. The predator was used to hunting alone, relying on its superior senses and strength to take down any target. But these humans, they didn't react the way prey was supposed to. They didn't scatter. They didn't run. They didn't fear. The predator felt an uncomfortable knot form in its chest. Fear wasn't something it was familiar with. Yet, here it was, feeling the strange sensation of doubt. The extracav refocused its thoughts. It couldn't afford to hesitate. It was a hunter, the apex predator, and these humans were merely another obstacle to overcome. With a sharp inhale, the extracav crouched lower, slipping silently through the darkened landscape. The human's campfire flickered weakly in the distance, but it was the older man who caught its attention again. He stood at the far end of the camp, staring out into the night, his gaze unwavering. The predator felt the urge to strike, to end this hunt before it could get any more complicated. But then something unexpected happened. One of the younger humans, a woman, turned toward the older man. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and the extracav saw something in that exchange, an understanding. Without speaking, the woman moved to join him. Her movements were smooth, confident, and purposeful. She didn't appear fearful, not even the slightest bit. She was focused, ready. The extracav had seen enough to know that when humans acted this way, They were not simply going through motions. They were preparing for something bigger, something more. The predator hesitated again. What was it about these humans? Why weren't they afraid? It was as though they had already accepted their fate, whatever it might be. Their sense of unity, their ability to remain calm in the face of certain danger, these things weren't normal. They weren't supposed to exist in prey. The Exrakev's thoughts became fragmented. It had come here to hunt, to kill, and yet, with each passing moment, the idea of killing these creatures seemed less and less appealing. The woman whispered something to the older man, and the Exrakev saw the faintest smile tug at the corner of his lips. There was no panic, no signs of retreat, only quiet determination. The predator could feel the weight of the moment pressing down. It was no longer just about survival. It was about something deeper, something that the Exrakev couldn't quite put into words. It took a step closer, its movements more cautious now. It was no longer certain of the outcome of this hunt. It felt uncertain. There was something about the humans that kept it off balance. The Exrakev had never faced such an opponent before. The prey wasn't running. It wasn't terrified. It was prepared to fight back, and that more than anything made the hunt all the more dangerous. The predator moved closer still, drawn by a force it didn't understand, knowing that this hunt would not be like any other. The challenge was just beginning. The Exrakev crouched in the shadows, its mind racing. It had hunted countless species, each with their own predictable patterns, their weaknesses easy to exploit. But these humans were different. The way they moved, the way they worked together, defied everything it had learned about hunting. The predator could no longer rely on brute force and instinct alone. It would need a new approach, one it wasn't sure it had. The humans continued to act with an eerie calm, almost as if they expected the Exrakev to strike. The older man, the one who had spoken earlier, had been observing the surroundings for what seemed like hours. His sharp eyes never missed a detail, never let their guard down. He had seen the predator, no doubt, and yet he didn't panic. He was simply waiting, waiting for something. The predator felt the unsettling weight of this weight. It was used to being the one who initiated the battle, the one who set the terms. But here, with these humans, it was not in control. They were controlling the situation, and the Exrakev didn't know how to react to that. A soft rustle broke the silence. One of the younger humans, a man, stood up from behind a large rock, his posture alert. The Exrakev's eyes locked onto him immediately. The human's gaze swept across the dark landscape, his eyes narrowing as if searching for something. The predator knew this was its chance. The human's focus was momentarily diverted, and it could strike now with ease. But then, to its surprise, the man looked directly at the spot where the Exrakev was hiding. For a split second, their eyes met, human and predator. And the Exrakev froze. There was no fear in the human's eyes. No panic, only recognition. The man didn't move, didn't shout, didn't call for help. He just nodded once, as if acknowledging something the predator couldn't understand. The Exrakev's heart thudded heavily in its chest. The predator had been spotted, but the human didn't react like prey would. It didn't flee. Instead, it seemed ready. Ready for something the predator wasn't prepared for. Something about this encounter was different. The predator's instincts screamed at it to strike, to eliminate the threat before it had a chance to escalate. But the hesitation remained, a deep, gnawing doubt that was growing harder to ignore. The older man stepped forward, his calm eyes never leaving the predator's hiding spot. He didn't shout or make any aggressive movements. He simply spoke in a low, steady voice, as if speaking to a creature he had known for years. "We've been waiting for you," he said, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. "We knew you'd come." The Exrakev's mind reeled. Waiting for it. Knew it would come. The predator had been hunting these humans, but they had known all along. They had prepared for its arrival. This was no mere encounter. The humans were playing a game, and they were already one step ahead. The man took another step forward, his face hard but not angry. "You've underestimated us," he said quietly. "We don't run. We don't hide. We fight." The words struck the extracav like a physical blow. The concept of fighting back was foreign to it. Prey didn't fight back. Prey was supposed to be afraid, to scatter, to die. But these humans, they weren't afraid. They weren't running. They were standing their ground, waiting for the predator to make its move. For the first time in its long, storied existence, the extracav felt something it had never known: uncertainty. The predator, usually so sure of its victory, suddenly found itself facing something it could not predict. These humans were not the weak, helpless creatures it had assumed. They were strong. And more terrifyingly, they were united. They were a force, not a group of scattered individuals. They were ready for war, and they had been ready all along. The extracav paused, the weight of the moment settling in. It could strike, yes, but it knew that the consequences would not be like any hunt it had faced before. These humans were not prey. They were a challenge. The hunt had changed. The extracav stayed hidden in the shadows, its mind racing. It had been hunting for centuries, and never had it encountered such a challenge. The humans had turned the tables, and the predator wasn't sure how to respond. The older man's words echoed in its mind. "We don't run. We don't hide. We fight." The predator had been wrong about them. It had underestimated them, assumed that their primitive technology and fragile bodies would be easy to overpower. But now, standing in the dark, it felt a strange weight pressing down on it, as if it had wandered into a trap of its own making. The humans were moving again, with quiet precision. They were setting up more traps, not in panic, but with careful thought and coordination. Every movement was deliberate, as if they knew exactly what to do. The extracav had been in many battles, and it knew how to read the body language of its prey. But this was different. The humans didn't tremble. They didn't flinch. They were prepared, ready for whatever came next. The predator's claws flexed involuntarily, its senses on high alert. The humans weren't afraid of it. In fact, they seemed to be waiting for it to strike, knowing it would make a move soon. The extracav realized, for the first time, that it was no longer in control. These humans had their own strategy, one it couldn't predict. A quiet voice broke through the tension. The younger woman, the one who had set the snare earlier, whispered to the older man. "He's still out there," she said, her voice calm but firm. "He's watching us." The older man nodded, his face grim. "Let him watch. He knows we're not afraid. He's waiting for us to make the first move." The extracav shifted, trying to find an opening. It had hunted countless prey, tracked them, waited for the perfect moment to strike. But these humans were unlike anything it had encountered before. They weren't scattering in fear, hoping to survive. They were adapting, and in some strange way, they were drawing the predator into their game. The predator's sensors picked up the faintest of sounds, a footstep in the dirt, the rustle of a leaf. It turned sharply, eyes narrowing, ready to pounce. But there was no movement, no sign of weakness from the humans. They weren't running or hiding. Instead, they were working in unison, communicating silently, shifting in ways that made it harder to predict their next move. The extracav growled low, its breath coming faster. It was frustrated. These humans were not like any prey it had faced before. They weren't predictable, and that was what made them so dangerous. The predator could see them now, all of them, moving in tight formation. Each one had a role to play. The woman with the snare was now watching the horizon, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The older man stood still, his back straight, waiting. The other three humans were spreading out, creating a perimeter, ensuring that no one could approach without being seen. The extracav's heart pounded in its chest. It was no longer the hunter. It was being hunted. These humans had made it the prey. They were using their collective intelligence, their ability to communicate without words, to control the situation. The predator had become just another part of the landscape, a moving target in a deadly game that it didn't fully understand. It needed to strike soon. It needed to regain control. But as the HFY prepared to make its move, something in the back of its mind told it to pause, to wait just a little longer. These humans weren't afraid. They weren't backing down. And that, more than anything, was what made them so terrifying. The predator's claws dug into the earth beneath it. The hunt had taken a new turn, and for the first time in its life, the HFY wasn't sure it would come out on top. The HFY remained still in the shadows, its muscles coiled and ready to strike. The humans were everywhere now, moving in perfect harmony. They were not running, not hiding. They were making their stand. The predator had underestimated them, fought them weak and defenseless. But they were anything but. Every move they made seemed calculated, like they knew exactly how to outwit it at every turn. The HFY's eyes darted from one human to the next, watching their movements carefully. The older man, the leader of the group, was standing by the fire now, his face expressionless. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension in the air. He wasn't looking for the HFY. He was waiting for it to make a mistake. The predator could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on it. This wasn't just a hunt anymore. It was a battle of wills. A rustle to its left caught its attention. One of the younger humans, a man, was crouching low to the ground, his eyes scanning the darkness. He had set up a motion detector earlier, and now he was waiting for the signal. The HFY had seen these devices before, but it hadn't expected the humans to be so well prepared. They weren't relying solely on their physical strength or primitive tools. They were using their intellect to turn the tide in their favor. The predator shifted its weight, trying to stay silent. It had always been the one to stalk, to wait for the perfect moment. But the humans had turned the tables. Now it was the one being hunted. They knew it was out there, somewhere in the darkness, and they weren't afraid. They were methodical, working together to trap it, to force it into the open. A high-pitched beep sounded from the motion detector, followed by the faintest click. The man's eyes locked onto the spot where the predator had been hiding. The HFY's heart skipped a beat. It had been detected. Before it could react, the man raised a small device in his hand, pressing a button. In an instant, the HFY's surroundings changed. The terrain, once familiar, seemed to shift and blur as bright lights flooded the area. The predator hissed in frustration, its eyes momentarily blinded by the sudden burst of illumination. It was caught in a trap, a net of light and sound, and for the first time, the HFY felt a spark of fear. The humans were closing in, their movements swift and confident. They weren't running toward the predator to attack. They were surrounding it, cutting off any escape. The HFY could hear their voices now, low but steady, as they communicated in perfect unison. There was no panic in their voices, only the certainty of a plan well executed. The older man stepped forward, his gaze locked on the predator. His eyes were calm, not with arrogance, but with an unshakable resolve. "We knew you'd come," he said again, his voice steady. "We've been preparing for this." The words sent a ripple of confusion through the HFY's mind. Preparing for it. How had they known? It hadn't expected them to anticipate its every move. They had seen it coming, prepared for the hunt before it had even begun. The HFY's mind raced, trying to process the situation. It was used to being the one in control, used to striking without hesitation. But these humans, these creatures, had changed the rules of the game. They had outsmarted it, outwitted it at every turn. The predator was no longer sure of itself. It had been caught in a net of intelligence, of strategy, something it had never fully understood. The older man stepped even closer now, his expression unwavering. "You're not the first predator to underestimate us," he said quietly. "And you won't be the last. But it ends here." For a moment, the HFY stood frozen, staring at the man. It had never faced anything like this before. It was used to being feared, to being the one in control. But now, it was the prey. And in that moment, the predator understood. This was not just a fight for survival. This was a test, a challenge, a confrontation of wills. And the humans were winning. The Exricav's claws dug deeper into the earth as it realized something fundamental. It had underestimated humanity. And now, it was too late to change the outcome. The Exricav stood motionless, trapped in the web the humans had woven with precision. The lights from the motion detectors blazed brightly, revealing every detail of the predator's form. It was exposed, its camouflage useless in the face of their calculated plan. The predator's mind raced, its instincts screaming to flee, to fight, to do anything other than remain trapped in this situation. But the humans were closing in, tightening the noose around it with every passing second. The older man, the one who had spoken before, stood just a few paces away now. His face was calm, unshaken. The Exricav could see the determination in his eyes, a quiet confidence that sent a ripple of uncertainty through its own mind. The predator had never faced an opponent like this, one that didn't fear it, didn't flinch in the face of danger, but instead fought back with intelligence and unity. It had never felt so vulnerable. The man raised his hand, signaling to the others. The younger woman who had set the snare earlier stepped forward, her movements deliberate. She held something in her hands, some kind of device the Exricav didn't recognize. It was small, compact, and held with the same steady confidence that the humans had displayed since the beginning. She glanced at the older man, who nodded. The predator's sensors flared briefly, warning of the approaching device. It tried to shift, to break free from its trap, but the lights only grew brighter, the beams more intense. The woman activated the device, and a high-pitched hum filled the air. The Exricav's senses screamed in pain as a disorienting wave of energy washed over it. Its vision blurred, its thoughts became muddled. The predator shook its head, trying to regain focus, but the interference was overwhelming. The older man watched as the Exricav struggled, his expression unchanged. "You underestimated us," he said again, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. "But now you see what we're capable of." The words hit the predator like a blow to the chest. It had thought of these humans as simple prey, weak and defenseless. It had underestimated their resolve, their ability to fight back, their ability to plan. And now, with the device in play, the predator was vulnerable. It had no way of countering this attack. For the first time in its life, the Exricav realized that it was not invincible. It was not the apex predator it had always believed itself to be. The humans, with their cunning and unity, had outwitted it at every turn. The predator's muscles trembled with the effort of resisting the disorienting effects of the device, but it was growing weaker by the second. The woman moved closer, still holding the device in her hands. "We don't fight like you," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "We don't rely on raw strength. We rely on our minds, on our ability to adapt." Her voice was steady, but there was a trace of something else in her tone. An understanding, a recognition of the predator's power, and what it had taken to bring it down. The Exricav's mind raced, trying to process the situation. It was caught in a web of its own making. It had come to this planet to hunt, to eliminate what it had thought were weak, primitive creatures. But instead, it had become the hunted. The predator had been taken down by the very things it had dismissed: intelligence, strategy, unity. The man stepped forward, his gaze unblinking as he looked directly into the Exricav's eyes. "You're strong, no doubt, but you didn't take us into account." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And that was your mistake." For the first time, the Exricav felt something it had never felt before: defeat. It was a strange, unfamiliar sensation, one that filled its chest with a cold, bitter realization. The hunt had ended, and the predator had lost. It had underestimated its prey, and now it was the one who would be controlled. The older man nodded toward the rest of the group. "Let's get him secured," he said. "We've won this one." The Exricav's body went still. It had been brought down, not by force, but by the humans' strength in numbers, their ability to think, to adapt. For the first time, it understood the true meaning of the phrase, fight to the end. And in this fight, the humans had shown it just how much they were capable of. The HFY stood motionless, its strength slowly ebbing away. The humans were calm, efficient, their movements sure and practiced as they approached it. The predator's mind, still struggling to process the overwhelming wave of energy that had disrupted its senses, found no easy escape. It was bound, not by force alone, but by the sheer will and intellect of its captors. The device in the woman's hands continued to hum with a quiet menace, ensuring the predator remained subdued. The older man walked closer, his footsteps measured, his gaze never leaving the HFY's eyes. Despite the situation, there was no fear in his demeanor, only quiet resolve. The others moved around, securing the predator in place, ensuring it could not break free. It was clear they had anticipated every move, every tactic the HFY might use. They were methodical, working together with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. The predator's mind began to accept what it had known, but had not been willing to face. This time, it was not the hunter. It was the hunted. "You underestimated us," the older man said, his voice carrying a weight of truth. "But in doing so, you taught us something important." The words stung, sharper than any wound the HFY had ever sustained. It had always prided itself on its ability to outthink its prey, to predict their every move. But these humans had done something it couldn't fathom. They had anticipated the predator's tactics, outsmarted it at every turn, and trapped it with ease. The predator could not deny it. They were not prey. They were something else entirely. The woman with the device stepped forward, her face impassive. "We knew what you were," she said, almost in a whisper. "We knew how to fight you before you ever made your move. You weren't the first predator we faced, and you won't be the last." The words cut deep. The HFY had assumed that the humans were weak, that they were no different from the countless other species it had hunted and killed. But now, trapped and defeated, it saw them for what they were, something entirely different. These humans, with their intellect and unity, were far more dangerous than any physical strength could ever be. The older man nodded, looking over the predator with an expression that held no malice, only recognition. "You could have left. You could have walked away and never returned. But you didn't. And now, you've learned what we're capable of." The predator's mind spun, struggling to form coherent thoughts. It had always thought that raw power, that fear, would win the day. But this hunt had proven otherwise. The humans had used their greatest strengths, their intellect, their adaptability, their unity, and had turned the predator's own tactics against it. It had underestimated them, thought them to be simple prey. But now it realized just how wrong it had been. The humans weren't merely fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. They had done what no other species had done before. They had not only fought back, but had done so with purpose and skill. The HFY could feel the weight of that realization settle in its chest like a stone. The older man took a step back, signaling for the others to begin securing the predator for transport. "This is over," he said quietly, "and you will leave this place, not as a conqueror, but as a defeated foe." The predator could do nothing but watch as the humans continued their work. Its mind, still reeling from the defeat, slowly began to process what had happened. It had been outwitted, outmanned, and outthought. The hunt was over, and the humans had won. For the first time in its long life, the HFY felt a shift in its understanding. It was no longer the hunter. It was the hunted. And in this strange, humbling moment, it knew one thing above all else. These humans were far more dangerous than it had ever imagined, and they would not be underestimated again.